Let's take a minor break here, Cover Killer Nation. We're about to be talking about a lot of metal. A lot of great stuff is coming out the bottom part of October's batting order, so to speak. But we need to talk about an album that just came out that's more along the rock spectrum and something that actually is a little bit of my bread and butter from a band that was really part of that bread and butter genre, but has kind of changed up their attitude and changed up their main point of focus over the past couple of years. And that band is actually Pearl Jam. Now, with the release of this album, Lightning Bolt, after Backspacer came out a couple of years ago, a review that I did on the old Cover Killer channel, which is now unfortunately gone, this was an album that really needed Pearl Jam to prove themselves a little bit, because Backspacer for me was a pretty well-executed and well-crafted album, but it felt as though there were a lot of songs that felt kind of just halfway done, halfway completed. It was almost as though it seemed a little bit rushed, and that may have been the tone that they were aiming for. However, it's just how it felt for me. Now, whenever you get into Lightning Bolt, you really want to kind of showcase that you still have and possess that old school attitude a little bit, but still also maintain what you've been doing here in the 2000s and 2010s, which for Pearl Jam has essentially been becoming this generation's younger version of Bruce Springsteen, U2, and basically just making a really classic rock style music, even though the guys, at least in our opinions, may not necessarily fit classic rock standards because they're not, from the 70s. And with this album, I feel that they're able to do that pretty well. However, they're able to blend a lot of different attitude, and that's one of the main reasons why I believe that this band has always kind of had a solid fan base, a solid foundation, and for a long period of time has always had just rave reviews. For example, whenever Mind Your Manners came out a couple of months back, this was something that was really kind of kick you right in the teeth. This was almost like Pearl Jam sounding 100% reinvigorated. They really possessed a lot of attitude and showcased a lot of attitude on this song, which really just kind of provoked a lot of people to think what this album was going to sound like. Was this whole entire album going to have that jilted sound to it, that really, over-caffeinated sound to it, where there's just going to be a lot of power, a lot of just punch to this? Or was it going to be something where this was going to be a one-off? Now, this executes itself as a little bit more of a one-off than anything else. However, it was definitely indicative to what was to come, and definitely brought a lot of zest, zeal, and kind of drive back to Pearl Jam fans, wondering about how this album was going to sound. But here's what I gotta say. If you really want a song to reinvigorate your hopes and your dreams and your real feelings towards the band, check out the newest single, which is entitled Sirens. This song right here is exactly what a song, or how a song should be constructed. It's something that starts off very simply, very innocently, and in fact it doesn't sound like it's got very much going for it. But as the chorus kind of builds, or if you want to go second verse into the chorus, as that builds, especially vocally, Eddie's vocals on this song are probably one of the best performances that he has had in quite a long period of time. You can actually feel the pain, the fear, the anxiety in his voice. You don't just hear it, you actually feel it. It causes the goosebumps to occur on your arms. It causes that part right in the back, right behind your neck to kind of, get raised and jilted a little bit. And it actually causes you to change yourself emotionally. It's something that actually affects you emotionally. The song is extremely powerful. It's one of the best songs that I've probably heard from the modern rock scene in quite a long period of time, and definitely the one that really translates a lot of old school philosophy, a lot of U2 and 1990s style writing mixed together with a real classic influence, but also with that real idea of a power ballad that you could probably expect from everybody from bands from the late 1980s with a lot less of the power chords and a lot less of the hair, all the way up into the more modern, with arms wide open style songs that you heard from bands such as Creed in the latter part of the 1990s, first part of the 2000s. Now, I know that Creed is kind of a naughty word around here, but you have to admit that with arms wide open, power ballad. Now, whenever you listen to the remainder of this disc, you might wonder, well, what is there really else to offer? And there's a lot. There's a lot of just standard classic rock emotion on here. Basically, Pearl Jam are a band that are able to translate something very, very simple and make it into something that feels a little bit larger than life, but doesn't really sacrifice the soul for it. In fact, the soul is one of the principal things that kind of goes into the building process of these songs. Whenever you consider songs such as Pendulum, which is another softer moment that goes right into Swallowed Whole, which amps it up again, you're seeing that this album is able to really maintain itself as far as the stylistic change is concerned. You're seeing that they're really able to fairly balance things between the softer and more melodic moments and the moments that are a little bit more rough-edged. Now, whenever you get to Sleeping By Myself, you get to a song that was actually on Eddie Vedder's solo work, which was ukulele songs, and once again, he's playing a ukulele, but he has the rest of the band there to back him up. Now, I haven't heard the original, so I confess there's not much I can really use as a comparison point here, but after hearing this version, I really like it. I would kind of like to hear just the solo ukulele on this, because it would probably make it sound a little bit more intimate and isolated, but at the same time, this version still stands up also. Yellow Moon reminded me a lot of Neil Young whenever I heard it, and maybe it's just because whenever I think of Harvest, I think of Harvest Moon. I don't know, it's just a lot of different things. However, this is a good song that leads into Future Days, which is the finale on the album. And once again, Future Days kind of takes you off on a little bit more of a real intimate kind of somber note, but it's definitely one that is well worth it. It's definitely one that seems to be drawing a lot of thought about what the future really is going to hold and what kind of lies ahead of us. And it's definitely something that, even though it has a somber tone, it does leave you feel alright. Overall, this album is a great comeback for him. I really didn't consider Backspacer to be all of that incredible, but this is an album that definitely seems to have a lot going for it. I'd probably give it a 7.75 out of 10. I would like to have a little bit more in the middle kind of really jut out at me, but at the same time, for what it's worth, this is an album that has a lot of balance, a very solid flow, and not to mention, it has enough tricks up its sleeve where it definitely feels fresh, as opposed to it feeling tired and worn out. Just because somebody is aiming for a classic rock sound, just because a band is aiming for a classic rock sound, doesn't necessarily mean that that classic influence is going to sound tired and dated. Pearl Jam's found a way in order to really cap off a little bit more of a modern influence to it and kind of give it an attitude all its own. And that's what I dig about this. So, hey, how many of you guys have checked out this album? I know a lot of you are metalheads, but how many of you guys checked out the Pearl Jam disc? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear it. Later.